In the hold of a landing craft pitching through the swells off the Normandy coast, a soldier from Winnipeg checked his rifle for the fourth time in an hour. He was 19 years old. Across from him sat men from Regina, from Toronto, from towns in New Brunswick that most of the world had never heard of. They had studied photographs of the beach. They had memorized the name of every strong point behind it. What none of them could prepare for was the sound of the ramp mechanism engaging. The men of the 3rd Canadian Infantry Division carried something the other assault divisions didn't. They carried Dieppe. 2 years earlier, on the morning of August 19, 1942, more than 4,000 Canadians had landed on the beaches of a French coastal town in an operation that lasted 9 hours before collapsing. More than 900 Canadians died. Nearly 2,000 were taken prisoner. The Dieppe raid became the single bloodiest day in Canadian military history, and the lessons drawn from it about the necessity of air cover, naval fire support, armored vehicles in the first wave, and the catastrophic cost of assaulting a fortified port directly had shaped nearly every decision made in planning the Normandy landings. The men who survived Dieppe and joined the 3rd Canadian Division were no longer young men by June 1944. They were experienced ones. And for the hundreds of soldiers around them who had not been at Dieppe, the name was not history. It was a shadow with a shape. Juno Beach stretched approximately 10 kilometers along the Normandy coastline, positioned between the British sector of Gaule to the west and Sword to the east. The towns of Courseulles-sur-Mer, Bernières-sur-Mer, and Saint-Aubin-sur-Mer sat directly behind it, each fortified by the German 716th Infantry Division into a network of interlocking strong points designed to cover every meter of sand below. The approach from sea was further complicated by an offshore reef running parallel to the coast, close enough to the surface to tear the hull from a landing craft at low tide. Allied planners pushed each hour back 30 minutes relative to other beaches to allow the tide to rise enough for the boats to clear the rocks. Those 30 minutes would cost them. When the naval and air bombardment shifted inland and the 1st Canadian landing craft crossed toward the beach, the German defenders had enough time to recover their positions. The offshore obstacles, steel hedgehog frames, Belgian gate barriers, and wooden stakes fitted with mines, were still partially exposed above the waterline. Men looking over the sides of the landing craft could see what was between them and the sand. The engineers who were supposed to clear those obstacles before the infantry arrived would be working at the same time as the infantry and under the same fire. The Queen's Own Rifles of Canada reached the beach at Bernières-sur-Mer in the first wave. B Company landed directly in front of a fortified German position at a section of beach where they're supporting DD tanks. The duplex drive amphibious Shermans, designed to arrive alongside the infantry and suppress the defenses, had not yet reached the shore. The 1st Hussars had been forced to launch their tanks further out than planned due to the condition of the sea, and several had been lost before reaching the waterline. B Company went up the beach without armor. They crossed approximately 200 meters of open sand against a defended seawall. It took less than 3 minutes. The company sustained more casualties in those minutes than at any other point in the entire war. What followed across the length of Juno Beach was not a single story, but dozens unfolding simultaneously. The Royal Winnipeg Rifles fighting through the fortified streets of Courseulles house by house, clearing rooms with grenades in buildings whose walls were still trembling from naval shell fire. The Regina Rifle Regiment pushing through the eastern edge of the same town and carving out the first consolidated beachhead in the Canadian sector. The North Shore Regiment fighting through Saint-Aubin against defenses built into the seawall itself, strong points that had survived the bombardment and now needed to be reduced by men on foot in close quarters. On the beach behind the advance, the wreckage of the first minutes was still present. Landing craft struck by fire or snagged on obstacles. Vehicles stalled at the waterline. Engineers working to clear paths through the steel barriers while more boats arrived behind them. Medics moving through the surf. And yet the Canadians, unit by unit and then sector by sector, crossed the beach and entered the towns and kept moving. By the end of June 6, 1944, the 3rd Canadian Infantry Division had advanced further inland than any other Allied division on D-Day. Elements reached the Camp Bayou Road, 9 to 10 kilometers from where the ramps had dropped that morning. Canadian troops touched the outskirts of villages that had been listed in the planning documents as optimistic objectives for the end of the week. Caen itself, listed as a potential Day 1 goal, would not fall until the following month. But the ground the Canadians covered in those hours between the ramp drops and nightfall represented one of the deepest single-day advances of the entire Normandy campaign. The cost was permanent. Somewhere between 340 and 360 Canadians were killed on June 6th, and total casualties across killed, wounded, and missing exceeded 1,000. Behind every number in that accounting was a name. Behind every name was a face that had been in a landing craft that morning, looking at the beach, listening for the ramp. Some of those men had fathers who had fought at Vimy Ridge in 1917, the battle that many Canadians identify as the moment their nation first understood itself as something distinct from the empire it belonged to. Independence in that tradition is not declared in a document. It is earned in a place, at a cost, and carried home by the people who survive. The men crossing Juno Beach on June 6, 1944, were not thinking in those terms while they crossed it. They were thinking in much smaller units. The next meter of ground, the man beside them who had just gone down, the window above the road that might be held by someone waiting behind the glass. But the terms applied anyway. In the Canadian War Cemetery at Bagny-sur-Mer, a few kilometers from the beach, nearly 2,050 soldiers rest beneath white stone markers, arranged in rows that follow the natural slope of the ground. The cemetery faces inland, toward the Norman countryside that the men buried there were advancing into when they were killed. Its back is to the sea. The beach itself is still there. On clear mornings at low tide, when the sand flats are wide and the light comes in flat from the east, it looks almost nothing like what it was. The fortified houses along the front have been restored. Children play at the waterline. Somewhere out beyond the breakers, still visible at low tide, the dark lines of the offshore reef break the surface a few hundred meters from shore. The same rocks that pushed the landing craft back 30 minutes on the morning of June 6, 1944. The same rocks that sent B Company of the Queen's own rifles up that beach without armor. 30 minutes, 200 meters of sand, a distance that is never fully closed.